This is Yasser Hook with Cressy Sports Performance, and in this first video we're going to go over counter movement jump force time curves and how you categorize them by phases. So this is a force time curve that you would get when running a counter movement jump on a force plate. Just a little bit about orienting yourself to this graph before we even start to look at shape or force signatures or anything like that. So on the x-axis you have time in seconds from left to right. And then on the y-axis, you have force in newtons from the bottom to the top. Okay, our force plates have a left and right foot plate, so you get a combined force output and then a left foot and a right foot force as well. The left foot force is shown with the purple graph, and then the right foot force is shown with the orange graph. You also have shaded areas in here, and those correlate to different phases that we will go over in this video of the counter movement jump. You also have a little white line that you can barely kind of see here, but that's the system weight. So essentially that's body weight on an athlete. Everything metric-wise is calculated based off this force time curve. So it's super helpful, I think, to initially understand what you're looking at when you're looking at a force time curve, because it can be a little daunting when it pops up on the iPad in the middle of the test and an athlete says, what is that? So I think if you can understand this first, it makes understanding all the metrics a little bit easier. So again, time in seconds, force in newtons on the y-axis, combined force, so that's just total force in blue, left foot force in purple, right foot force in orange. Different phases here are shaded, and then system weight or body weight is this little white line, and again you can see that's their 0 point where they started at. We'll come back to earlier or later. All right, so breaking them jump up into different phases. I break the jump up into 5 phases. You have the unweighting phase, braking phase, propulsive phase, flight, and landing. And obviously this is me completing a counter movement jump over here on the right. And then this is another force time curve. This is what you'd get when you test an athlete and it pops up on the iPad. First, so looking at the graph shape from a phase categorization standpoint, the beginning we're going to have unweighting. This is the yellow part shaded. In the middle we're going to have braking. This is the red part shaded. Propulsion is going to be shaded green towards the end of the beginning part. And then we're going to have flight. So this is the time when the athlete's in the air, and then obviously there's no readout of force here at the bottom. And then landing. This is going to be at the end. It's going to be a little more jagged and aggressive. We don't deal too much with flight and landing at CSP. We mostly focus on unweighting, braking, and propulsive, just based on KPIs for our athletes and ease of actually using the data and the information that the graph gives us into programming. Starting off with unweighting, so you're going to get a steep decline in force at the beginning, and obviously this correlates to when the athlete is standing still. Here in a second, I'll unweight, make myself lighter than I am, and then I start braking right about there. So this is that little bit of time where I go from system weight, I become a little bit lighter than I am until right about there when I hit zero velocity. And I actually, or I'm sorry, system weight, not zero velocity, and I become the exact amount of weight as my body weight right before I go into braking. The next phase is the braking phase. This you can think of as stopping yourself at the bottom. So you do a counter movement jump, you go to unweight, and then you try to stop yourself at the bottom before you push off the plate. This is that steep incline in force at the bottom. You can think of this roughly as the eccentric phase, although it's a little more complex than that. Again, this is shaded in red here on the graph. Propulsive phase, you can think of this roughly as the concentric phase. Again, it's a little more intricate than that, but for sake of the exercise, that is what's happening at a joint perspective. So this is after I hit zero velocity at the bottom, and then I push myself away from the plate until my feet leave, and then you see the propulsive phase ends when there is no force on the plate, and I hit zero. You can see there might be a little deviation between the left and right foot. That's where an asymmetry would come into play. Next we have is flight. Again, this is when the athlete's in the air. So from the time I leave the plate till my feet hit the plate, there's no force. And again, obviously we don't really use this much. There are a few metrics that come with it, and it is very helpful to understand where it happens in the graph, but it's not something we use too often when making decisions on programming or putting athletes into buckets, etc. The last phase is landing. So this is all the way over here on the right. Again, this is a little aggressive. This isn't something we use too often. you'll see a steep incline in force, and a lot of times people are trying to jump so high that they actually land on one plate or sometimes no plates. It's not helpful for us in our population of strictly performance, but there can be some correlations and some uses for people with certain injuries on one side or the other to make sure they're landing on both feet, etc. So it is super helpful to understand where it is on the graph. And that's all the phases we have in the counter movement jump. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit, understand what you're looking at when you see this come up. And then you can kind of go from there, and we'll go into other videos on how to understand the metrics and the graph shapes, etc.